Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical themes in Arsenal's 1-0 win at Aston Villa. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on Arsenal and Aston Villa's pressing. Then we'll solely focus on Arsenal's right-hand side to see how they were able to create chances. And lastly, we'll see how both sides look to adjust following Saka's opening goal. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal still in their 4-3-3 and Aston Villa in more of a 4-3-2-1. In many cases here, Mikel Arteta or Arsenal fans were probably worried about how they would be able to shut down Buendia and Coutinho, but Arsenal once again did a very good job of pressing from the front and dropping off deeper into their two banks of four to ensure that the opposition couldn't harm their backline. Here it was somewhat similar to what we saw against Liverpool, with Lacazette looking to press the center back, and then Odegaard also doing a very good job of sitting on Douglas Luiz, and then Saka would tuck in centrally to deal with Mings. In that situation, you have Smith Rowe dealing with Cash, Xhaka should be dealing with Ramsey, and then Thomas Partey should be dealing with McGinn. However, what ended up happening was that you had Cedric down that right-hand side pushing forward to deal with Young, and if that wasn't the case due to Coutinho or McGinn possibly shifting out into those wider areas, Saka would look to recover, to drop off and track the movement of Ashley Young. So you have Cedric pushing high, and then you could have White stepping out to deal with Coutinho. And if that wasn't the case, what ended up happening was that they ensured that when Coutinho and Buendia drifted centrally, Thomas Partey and Xhaka would be sitting deeper to ensure that they could cover that movement in towards those central areas. So for the most part, you're often seeing Saka ahead of Mings and then McGinn looking to push forward and Saka blocking off the passing lane. And then that would be a situation where Thomas Partey would step to McGinn and then White would track the movement of Coutinho, and vice versa. If Xhaka stepping into the path of Ramsey, that could leave Buendia free. And if you don't have Tierney stepping into that gap to close him down because he doesn't have to worry about Cash, then you'd simply have Gabriel or Thomas Partey shifting over, and then White would pick up Coutinho. Ultimately, the varied movement from the Aston Villa attacking players decided how Arsenal would press. Like for instance, there were times where Ramsey would drop in towards his own third to attempt to get on the ball, and Smith Rowe would simply block off the passing lane in towards him as he stepped towards Cash, and then Xhaka could hold his position in case Buendia dropped off Tierney in towards that central area. And there were also simply times where you had Saka stepping towards Mings, Cedric would be prepared to close down Young, and Thomas Partey would push a bit higher to deal with the movement of McGinn because they knew that White could shift over to deal with Coutinho. There were times where Odegaard could shift off of Luiz and shift towards McGinn, and that's where you could have Lacazette dropping off on the deeper lying midfielder. And then in the instance where Saka would step out towards Young, that made things much easier for Arsenal because then you could have Odegaard shifting towards McGinn, and if Coutinho dropped off deeper, Thomas Partey could pick him up, and then Cedric would be free out in that right back zone, and then White could sit off a bit deeper and help out Gabriel against Watkins. The difference now is that when Arsenal dropped off into two banks of four, they were still very comfortable in the sense that they didn't really have to worry about Ramsey and McGinn, and it was more about the movement of Buendia and Coutinho. Ramsey and McGinn often did operate in the inside channels, and there were times where they dropped off a bit deeper in their own half to get on the ball, and that's when you would see Lacazette or Odegaard shift across while one stuck on Douglas Luiz, and they were able to apply pressure. This wasn't necessarily an issue for Arsenal given the shape of Aston Villa's attack. They wanted Cash and Young to push higher up the pitch to run at Tierney and Cedric, so they could be running off Smith Rowe and Saka, but even in those situations, if Smith Rowe and Saka end up picking up Ramsey and McGinn in deeper positions, then you could have Tierney and Cedric dealing with Young and Cash in those attacking areas. So while Arsenal did at times sacrifice those wide areas for Aston Villa's fullbacks to attack their fullbacks, what you ended up seeing was that in central areas, they did a very good job of stifling Buendia and Coutinho, and those two frankly made it very easy because in that central area, you often had the center backs against Watkins, but what we often saw was that Coutinho and Buendia on several occasions were frustrated that they weren't receiving the ball between the lines, and that encouraged them to drop off into space ahead ahead of the Arsenal midfield bank, while the other joined the attacking line and was looking to get in behind to receive the balls over the top. There were instances where you had Coutinho dropping ahead of the midfield bank and looking to play balls over the top for Buendia's run in behind, and there were even times where you had Buendia and Coutinho dropping off together in those deeper central midfield zones, and from there you were consistently seeing Xhaka and Thomas Partey monitor their movement into those zones and apply pressure. And it also can be said that Lacazette does deserve credit when he was dropping off deeper, as on several occasions he was blocking off passing lanes and winning possession off of the Aston Villa midfield. Whereas when we shift to Aston Villa's shape, what ended up happening was that you would expect them to be in more of a 4-5-1 out of possession, but here we had Buendia and Coutinho tucking in narrow, and it did look like more of a 4-3-3 shape regardless. Gabriel and White did have time to get on the ball, and Watkins was blocking off the passing lane into Thomas Partey, while Xhaka and Odegaard were in those gaps between Ramsey and Douglas Luiz and McGinn. So what you often saw was Xhaka was allowed to push a bit higher, and there were occasions where Odegaard was shifting in toward that inside right position to get on the ball. Now that wasn't impactful when McGinn did shift across to close him down, and at times he was there with Coutinho or Douglas Luiz. And similar to the game against Liverpool, Odegaard was more influential when he pushed forward into those gaps between Mings and Young, because then that forced Young to tuck in central, and then Arsenal were able to shift balls out to Saka. So what we ended up seeing was that Gabriel and White had time to get on the ball, but because Buendia and Coutinho were so narrow, there was often a passing lane out towards Tierney and Cedric to help Arsenal progress their play. In those situations, by the time they got the ball out into those zones, Buendia and Coutinho would be forced to scurry over to close down the fullbacks, and Watkins wasn't consistently tracking back to sit on Thomas Partey, so the fullbacks often had a square passing outlet into the path of Thomas Partey to push forward. Over on the left-hand side, what you ended up seeing was that Xhaka at times was dropping off deeper into that inside left position and Tierney was pushing forward, and Smith Rowe was occupying cash, so he was often checking into the ball, but there were times where he would shift out in towards the touchline as well. He was often on the touchline when Xhaka was in a higher position in between Cash and Konsa, but Arsenal looked more impactful when Xhaka was sitting in that deeper role, Tierney was getting the ball out towards the touchline, and then Smith Rowe was looking to run off Ramsey and McGinn to get the ball in the left channel. As that game progressed, when Smith Rowe was making that movement, Konsa began to shift over to close down that threat, and that's why Arsenal really struggled to have any impact down the left-hand side, despite the fact that they were able to get Tierney into advanced positions, whether it be Xhaka or Smith Rowe high playing the ball in towards him, as he ran forward on several occasions due to the fact that Buendia wasn't tracking his movement. Therefore, Gabriel was a reliable outlet from center back, as he was capable of stepping forward and consistently sliding the ball across Buendia and Ramsey or McGinn for Tierney on that touchline, and there he would be looking to play the ball around Cash for Smith Rowe looking to make runs in towards that zone. Yet Smith Rowe did a very good job of forcing Cash towards him, retaining possession, and then winning free kicks. Whereas on the right-hand side, it went as expected. Saka was hugging the touchline, but like I said, when Odegaard dropped off deeper, he was being tracked by McGinn or at times Douglas Luiz, or on the rare occasion, you would have Coutinho and Buendia tracking back as well. So what ended up happening was he was pushing forward into that zone ahead of Mings and Young. He was forcing McGinn to track back, or at times Ramsey to track back to monitor his movement. And then like I said, if they played the ball out wide, they could square it towards Thomas Partey, and then he would be able to shift the ball out towards Saka to run at Ashley Young. Now, Saka was unimpactful when you had Coutinho and McGinn, or simply McGinn and Mings shifting over to help out Young, and that's where you ended up seeing Aston Villa successful against Saka. But the reoccurring theme in that opening half was Arsenal was capable of shifting the ball out towards Saka. He was able to get himself into 1v1s against Ashley Young, and then from there he would have the overlapping run or underlapping runs from Odegaard, and when they combined down that right hand side, it created issues for Aston Villa. And then even when you look to the build-up to Arsenal's opener, it stems from a quick free kick, and it's Cedric making the overlapping run and Odegaard adopting an advanced position. Granted, all the markers were in the penalty area, but he does attract attention, and from there Cedric's able to get towards the byline to deliver the cross into the penalty area. If we look to an example, it's Thomas Partey on the ball in his own half just beyond Watkins, and focus on Odegaard between the lines as Thomas Partey looks to split McGinn and Coutinho. As that play develops, the issue that Aston Villa encounters is that Young misjudges the ball and it allows Saka to get free down the right channel and focus on Odegaard's positioning just ahead of Mings. Saka ends up carrying that ball towards the byline beyond Young, and it forces Mings to come out to apply cover, but Mings has a lot of space to cover, and that allows Saka to pull the ball back in between Young and Mings for Odegaard breaking in towards the penalty area. Douglas Luiz does a very good job of recovering his positioning to close down Odegaard, but from there, Odegaard's able to square the ball across Ramsey in towards an unmarked Smith Rowe entering the penalty area. And as you can see from that simple move, Saka and Odegaard are able to take Aston Villa players out of the game and create a goal scoring opportunity for Smith Rowe, but he ends up skying his effort over the net. There was a situation where Odegaard played the ball across Young for Cedric as Saka tucked into a central area, and when Cedric received the ball in right half space, he ended up pulling it across Young first time, but the issue that Arsenal encountered was that Saka took a first touch, and that allowed Douglas Luiz and Ramsey to shift across desperately to close him down, and that forced him to rush his effort, and it went wide of the net for a corner. And the other opportunity in the second half witnessed Thomas Partey ahead of that Douglas Luiz pressure, where you end up seeing Ramsey ahead of Xhaka, but Odegaard did a very good job of shifting laterally towards the touchline to pull away McGinn, and that allowed Saka to check into the ball ahead of Ashley Young, and from there Saka was able to take a first touch, hold off Ashley Young, take a touch across the defender, and you see Lacazette occupying Mings and Smith Rowe occupying Cash, and he was able to carry the ball towards the center backs, and they couldn't step because of Lacazette's positioning, but by the time Saka took additional touches, they were able to apply slight pressure, and Saka bent his effort inches wide of the net. Therefore, following the goal, we did witness some adjustments from both sides. In terms of Aston Villa, what we ended up seeing now is that they were looking to press a bit higher, and whenever Thomas Partey was looking to check in towards the ball, we witnessed Douglas Luiz stepping forward to apply pressure. It would often witness Buendia stepping towards the center backs and Coutinho stepping towards the fullback on the ball, or vice versa. And then from there, you'd have McGinn and Ramsey looking to step towards Odegaard and Xhaka, while Luiz would push forward, and they'd have 6 men looking to close down that Arsenal build-up. The other alternative for Villa was to have them press on goal kicks, and in that situation, they had Watkins sitting ahead of Thomas Partey, Buendia and Coutinho ahead of the center backs, and then you would see Ramsey and McGinn looking to step towards Xhaka and Odegaard. But in those situations, the fullbacks were free, so all it took was a simple Leno punt over the top into one of the fullbacks to help Arsenal push forward. The only real threat that they had was that Ashley Young was pushing forward against Cedric and getting into areas where he could deliver crosses into the box, but Arsenal on several occasions did a very good job of dealing with that threat, and the same can be said about McGinn in deeper areas when he did pick up the ball on that left-hand side. Whereas in terms of a tactical perspective, Steven Gerrard made like-for-like changes, bringing on Leon Bailey and Traore. Traore was hugging the touchline, but as the game progressed, he did move into central area so that Cash could push forward, and Leon Bailey was occupying space in between that Cedric White gap so that Young could push forward to deliver crosses. And from there, similar to Buendia and Coutinho, Bailey was offering another threat in Arsenal's penalty area to help free up space for Watkins to get onto the end of crosses. Arteta's counter to that was to bring on Nicolas Pepe down the right-hand side to offer protection for Cedric, but even then, Young was still able to get crosses into the box, and Pepe didn't offer much of an attacking influence. And similar to Pepe, and Nketiah didn't offer much of a spark off the bench, and he turned to holding for Odegaard to ensure that Arsenal had another center back capable of winning aerial duels, as Danny Ings did eventually enter the game, and Arsenal retreated into a 5-4-1 to close things out. So as you can see, while Saka deserves credit for exploiting Aston Villa's weaker left-hand side, Arsenal for the most part here were equally impressive out of possession in terms of neutralizing Aston Villa's attacking options.